Welcome to Talkin' Divorce with Don and Lori.
Hello, this is Talkin' Divorce, and we have Lori McShane, my co host, and with us our special guest, Jackie Adams, who is a forensic accountant. I've known Jackie for a number of years. I could tell you that she's extremely involved in the legal community, particularly family law cases. I've come to know that she's a top notch forensic accountant, and for all of you who don't know whether your case needs a forensic accounting, who don't know what they do, and to have some of your questions answered in a very succinct way, we're going to tackle all those things today. And today, Lori is going to take it off with the interview portion of this podcast. And of course, I'll chime in whenever I can. So, Lori, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Don. I am just so ecstatic to be here because I feel we're giving our viewers up close and personal with you, Jackie, in the wonderful world of forensic and how we can go so deep in so many different directions. But let's start off with just you. Can you give us a little bit of your background information?
Sure. I've been with my firm, White, Zuckerman, Warsawski, Luna, and Hunt, for over 35 years.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
I started there at
When you were in-
19.
No, I thought
Now I give my
grade
age
school.
away. And started as receptionist, and then went back to school, got my accounting degree, worked my way up, and now I'm a senior partner at White Zuckerman.
Holy cow.
Yes.
That's called loyalty. I mean, you started when you were a receptionist, worked your way up into college, got your degree, your credentials, and you started doing the heavy stuff.
Yes.
Man, I would love to see one of my receptionists become an attorney someday.
I know our late partner used to brag about it all the time that, look, we're such a good firm, and they are, that we
Longevity.
retain our, yeah. There's a lot of people there that have been there over 30 years.
Well, maybe at one of these next podcasts we could talk about all those people because I know probably most of them. I'd love to know, but Lori, I don't want to interfere with Lori's interview.
Oh, not at all. I love this. Why should people, what are reasons people should work with a forensic accountant?
There are multiple. Most of it is to assist the attorney. We do assist with a lot of the discovery issues, meaning we'll handle the documents, maintain the documents, organize everything. That's the first easy part. And then we'll analyze all the financial records to assist the attorney in coming up with amounts that will help determine support, determine the division and equalization of assets. A lot of it is just being a right hand, a litigation support.
Okay, I think you're more than that. You're an expert witness. Come on, litigation support. That sounds so boring.
It does.
I mean, let's face it. You're a detective. I mean, people would love to have your job because what you get to do is get the reports in front of you and go, somebody's not telling the truth here.
We do the deep dive on all the supporting documents, try to find all the answers, especially if there are questions. Like a lot of times, one party isn't familiar with the financial aspects of the marriage. They let somebody their spouse handle it all, and so we help explain it all, figure it all out for them, and find things that other parties didn't want found.
Well, you protect people.
Yes.
I mean, that's really what you do. Let me ask you this: do you ever get anybody that comes up and says, "Hey, Jackie, I want you to. You're an auditor, right? You're gonna look at every single statement for my marriage, and you're gonna audit everything." You don't do audits. Do
We
you?
don't do, it's not technically called an audit, but I believe a forensic accounting is actually even more invasive than an audit.
How
Because
so?
there are audit procedures, according to the AICPA, that need to be followed. But a lot of that is just ticking and tying and doing spot checks on certain areas for an audit to issue a report whether these financials are accurate or not. Where forensic accounting does the deep dive into what the payees are. Is it of a personal nature? Especially when we're dealing with business financials, let me clarify that. We look into what's being paid for, by whom, where, is it appropriate? Is it to the benefit of the community? Is it not to the benefit of the community? Is it going to add to income? Is it going to add to the value of the business? We look at all those aspects, especially the bank statements, the ledgers, the canceled checks. We get into every detail,
Every nook and cranny.
every nook and cranny. Yes.
Wow. So, why specialize in family law cases out of all specializations out there?
I think because my firm was very big in the family law community.
Okay.
So that I was trained that way and brought up through the ranks that way. So I do other forensic accounting, business dissolutions, and trust disputes and things of that nature, but 90% of my work is in divorce.
Okay.
Yeah. So how long has your firm been out there? I mean, you've been here there for 35 years. How
Yeah.
long were they there before you?
I think Paul White and Jack Zuckerman started White Zuckerman. I know Paul White had been doing it first, then Jack Zuckerman joined him, and then slowly but surely it built into what we have today. But I think they did it at least a decade before I even
And
came
one
on
of
board.
them was an attorney.
That's Jack Zuckerman. So
Right.
he has a JD, yes, as well as practicing CPA.
One thing, Lori, that you and our guests would be interested in knowing is that the thing that makes her firm unique is that they understand family law. And I'm sure your questions are going to get into how that happens and stuff. But because one of the founding partners was a lawyer, I think that set the tone. Because I could tell you right now that she knows more about family law cases involving property than most attorneys, including yours truly. And they could go, well, that's an Ackerman analysis. And they're referring to cases and stuff. And it's really cool having somebody with that degree of proficiency and knowledge of the law, because I don't believe that you could do this type of work the way that they do it without a study of the law.
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely.
Yes. A lot of what our education to continue to do this work is to be reading the same materials that family law attorneys do, so that we can, and we're most focused on things like you mentioned that affect property division, affect support issues, and the character. A lot of the character is whether it's a community asset or a separate property asset, whether it's a quasi, meaning it's part of each. So we know the case law on those specifics as well as, and sometimes better than some attorneys.
Yeah.
Why don't we substitute that with most attorneys?
So, do you only work with just attorneys, or do you work with individuals if they hire you, directly?
I do both. I
You
do
do
both.
both.
Yes,
Okay.
I do get retained directly by the client if they just want some guidance, make decisions even before they might file for divorce, see what the picture looks like. Though sometimes that'll backfire if they hire me as a consultant to assist them prior to filing for divorce. Then I might not be able to assist them throughout the divorce to be their retained expert witness if they first hire me as a consultant.
Okay.
So we advise them of that so that they can make proper decisions.
And Dawn, when do you think somebody should reach out to a forensic accountant?
So I probably have a similar answer to that, and Jackie will, I hope, chime in on this. But for me, sometimes you don't know whether you need one, and you need to speak to the forensic accountant first to determine that. I'll give you an example. A client who has a business but thinks that business has no value because of the fact that it's very small, there's no employees, they don't own a building, there's no commercial property involved in it, not a lot of assets to tabulate, and basically their name is the business, right? And a lot of people come to my office and say, Don, you know what, no court is going to assign any value to that. And I'm like, well, you don't know that because of the fact that there's this thing that's called goodwill. And of course,
Yes.
Jackie, in our future podcast, is going to get into the detail about what goodwill in a business is. But honestly, as an attorney, I can't tell somebody whether or not, Lori, if they need a forensic. Absolutely. I could give some good guesstimates. I mean, if you're got a paper out, and that's your business, then you probably don't need one. But there's a lot of businesses, especially the professions, where people say, look, I can never sell this thing, so therefore the court's not going to fix any value to it. Think again, So go and talk to Jackie. Jackie will give you a very nice tire kicking experience with looking under the hood and kind of figure out things to see whether you need one or not. What do you think about that?
It's goodwill is really continued public patronage, so there could be value to a business, even if it is just me. That's usually the argument. We get a lot of pushback on those sole practitioners that are just them, and there would be no business without them. But because you're going to continue that business, there is potential for community value, especially if the business was built during the marriage.
Yeah, Lori, one of the things that you should know too is, or our viewers should know, not you, you already know this, but the goodwill component, is something that is going to defy what people think. People think that, look, I can't sell my business, and the court doesn't really care about that. The court's preferred way of evaluating a business is usually by some measurement of goodwill. There are other methods, and the court can be sometimes persuaded to do a different method. But the old, well, if I put it in the newspaper and tried to sell my practice, nobody would ever pay for it. Yeah, that argument's been made through decades of litigation. It's lost every time. So Jackie would take the stand and she would explain the goodwill process, and that's why I think that, Jackie, I was going to ask you this question: is how does it feel when somebody comes into court and they don't have an expert to go against you, and they're like, yeah, I'll ask the questions myself? I mean, it seems to me it's like throwing a rubber ball against a cement wall type of thing. It's going to bounce back and hit you in the head, right?
It's going to be a worst case scenario for them, yes. Because if the court doesn't have anything else in front of it to make a decision on, like the value of a business, and it's just he said, she said, they're going to accept my report.
Yeah, who are they going to go with?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to obviously choose the expert.
So at the very least, you would need an expert just to double check.
Yeah.
Now, Jackie is extremely ethical, as well as anybody in her firm that I've worked with. They're not going to misstate the facts. They're not going to try to get one up, because they know that their trustworthiness is important in court, and you're in front of the same judges over just as much as attorneys, if not more sometimes. So their reputation is everything.
Yeah.
But there are forensic accountants out there that we don't know whether they're credible or not. So why wouldn't you hire somebody just to say, give me a report and let me look at it? But there are people that come into my office and they don't want to do it.
No.
And it's like, okay, you're headed for a train wreck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a few forensic accountants out there that would be ultra aggressive in their approaches, and so then you end up in even further litigation.
Can you explain that, how that happens?
They're instructed by counsel, this is what argument I want to make, rather than what would be reasonable.
That sounds like what we see with clients sometimes. They say, I want you to take this position and make this argument, and we're going, guess what? That won't play in Peoria.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I got to talk them out of that if I can. But it's interesting.
And so attorney-client interaction is extremely key, especially if one party is expecting too much, or one way or the other, where I'm not paying her, or I'm not paying him, or those kind of things. When the law is the law, unfortunately, and that's what we have to follow.
So can anyone with an accounting background do the type of work that you do?
That's a good question. Can they? Sure. Would it be accepted by the courts without? You have to be wadir'd and
What does that mean?
verify that you're capable of doing the work by the court. The court has to accept it. And basically, it's very difficult to become a forensic accountant, expert witness, because you have to testify first to even qualify to testify. Most times, depends on the issues, I would think, but you just can't step into that role. You'd really need a lot of education in the area to be able to accomplish a family law case, at least.
And I can tell you that it's been tried. Okay, I've seen many times where, hey, I know this guy out on the very corner of the county is going to come in, and his valuation of the business is radically different than yours, and they come in there and they don't have the background. They don't have the knowledge of the cases, and they're evaluating according to some method that doesn't play in family court. It's a very interesting experience when they do that. And the court is going to know whether or not the person's truly an expert. It's kind of like putting a professional ball player against a high school ball player. I mean, when you see it happen, it's overwhelmingly lopsided.
Yes, as well as a lot of times, for example, a professional practice will have their own accountant, regular tax accountant,
Yeah.
and they think they can testify on their behalf on the financial statements that they prepare. Possibly, but they don't have, like you said, the case law, the education in family law that is required and specific for forensic accounting.
Yeah, and some future podcasts, we could get into the nuances for our audience, attorneys and people that are needing family law forensic accountants. But trust me, that area of law that we're talking about is very nuanced and specialized.
Yeah.
So I believe that the answer to your question is pretty much no. Somebody could. It's like somebody says that, "Hey, Don, can I file a claim for a lawsuit for such and such?" And the answer is always, yeah, you could spend $400 over at the courthouse and file that claim. Now, the real question is are you going to prevail? So, I guess any accountant could pretend that they could do the work, but good luck, if the other side is a true forensic accountant like Jackie.
Yeah. And what type of reports go into forensic accounting with family law?
There are multiple.
I would imagine
so.
so.
First, we'll just start with support, which is usually the first issue addressed when case gets started. So we'll do what's called an income available for support report. And that report breaks down all the different areas of income available. There's many, many nuanced arguments for and against certain ways of presenting, and that all will end up in a report. That's the first one. Then we do prepare a community property balance sheet, which basically spells out all the community properties, separate property of the parties, and it's allocated between who is anticipated to take what asset so that an equalization can be determined to equalize the community property. And within that community property balance sheet, we'll summarize a ton of other reports. For example, we'll do post-separation accounting, we'll do reimbursement requests. The business value is usually, if there's a business, the business value is reflected within the community property balance sheet. So that's your summary, I'd call it. And then every potential supporting report, because there's also reports about what happened with the brokerage accounts. There's reports about what happened with the retirement accounts, because those are market impacted and have to be brought through current, and whether any monies were taken out or any monies put in. So that's where the character comes in as separate property or community property. If parties are putting funds into a market affected account post-separation with their post-separation effort income.
And we lay people call those tracing analysis. Go ahead. I didn't
We
mean to
call
interrupt
them. We have tracing is actually a much more detailed, because that looks at every single line item within a bank account, and you're trying to figure out what funds were used to acquire an asset, and or what funds that are left in the account are community or separate. So tracing is even more detailed than even the analysis of a brokerage account or a retirement account. We call those a carve, but that's just...
And you also do analysis on something that I'll never understand, the characterization of restricted stock units.
Yes. A Hug analysis, a Harrison analysis.
You're talking case law already.
Yes, yes, and there's three, main case law that you look to, and what's going to be most applicable for your circumstances on your stock options or your restricted stock units.
So Lori is heavily involved in a profession that we're all familiar with, and that's real estate. I'm sure you got some questions about what Jackie would do pertaining to real estate questions.
Yeah, especially since the community property, what you were just touching upon. What about to pay off the principal of the mortgage loan? Like, how does that work?
That's usually a difficult area. A lot of parties want to keep the house, but unless they're able to refinance, and they might not just have the means, and since the 2008 debacle, that it's difficult to refinance. You have to prove the income is there, the other assets to back it. You got to have the equity in the first place to be able to buy out the other party. And that's a hurdle in some cases when the party that wants to retain the residence can't because they are unable to refinance.
And what about the case though where somebody comes into the marriage with a house and they're getting a divorce 20 years later and they're like, yeah, guess what? You don't get it because it was mine to start off with. But the other spouse says that, but wasn't our income used to pay the mortgage? What do you call that?
That's typically called a more Marsden. And a lot of areas in that, when it comes to the house, is, you look at deeds. Where was it transferred? Was there an interspousal transfer deed? Was there 852 language? I'll let within the
Family
deed,
Code Section 852. Go ahead.
which would transmute the property from separate to community.
Okay.
And the separatizer, the person that had the property before marriage, could then still claim some reimbursement, but what you just said, that it's all mine just because I owned it prior to marriage. Possibly, if there was no mortgage on it and no principal pay down, then the principles of more Marsden, marriage of Bombino, there's 3 or 4 that affect just the character of the real estate.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't
and
know
again,
that.
that might even take 2 future podcasts to explain all of that. And I love more Marsden's analysis because it's fun. But what I've learned, Lori, is that we attorneys like to think that we could do that analysis ourselves because there's a program called Propetizer that I think was actually created by someone in your firm a long time ago. But it's really an analysis for dummies, And so we get it kind of right. But when you put it in the hands of Jackie, she's also going to be taking into consideration tax considerations and things like that to really come up with a number as to what is the community interest in a house. So if you are selling a house on behalf of a divorced couple, they may think that it's all going to go to him. Well, it might not be that case because Jackie's going to figure out that there's a large community component to it or not.
Right. Well, but we'll figure out how much is actually community because it's based upon not just, say, the principal pay down during the marriage. It's also whether there any improvements were made. If the property was refinanced and the community sucked money out of the property during the marriage and they got that benefit, that would adjust the whole calculation as well.
Yeah.
So it can be a tremendous calculation. It can be very straightforward if you don't have any of those issues. But if it's not, you need the detailed calculations.
Yeah, makes sense. It's perfect.